you guys see the chart that I posted into the group chat that showed Bitcoin activity as a function of year and value? Nick, can you just put that up just so that we can look at that together? The crazy thing about this chart when you look at it is, and it's pretty obvious, is that we are collectively in one way, shape, or form basically trading up ever since 2018, really, with all the stimulus. Because if you look at, the mean price of Bitcoin, about 2018, it was a nothing burger. What we were talking about was, a price that was sort of between a few $1,000s, $2,000, $3,000,
10,000,
$3,000. And then all of a sudden, when all of this stimulus money hit the market, look what happened to it. Yep. But I think something unique also happened, which is that people really understood how to run these very complicated off-chain Bitcoin ARBs. And I think we should explain what those are, because those are what's behind the Three Arrows Capital. It's behind, I think Sam had this kind of oblique tweet that said, some of these exchanges are actually already insolvent. They're already the walking dead. So the first thing to keep in mind is that, this is a completely unregulated market, right? There are no market makers per se that actually have reporting requirements to any regulatory authority. There aren't any clearing houses. There isn't a way for us to understand systemic risk as it builds in the crypto market. So what happened starting in 2018 and 19 is people realized the following things were true. It's sort of what we talked about last week. You go and do some crazy round. You, mark up some phantom equity in a company. That company then issues tokens. You then list the tokens, not on, a blockchain per se, obviously, but in a place where trades can happen off-chain. Right. And there's a bunch of exchanges where these things happen off chain because it's one, company, and then they have a bunch of segregated sub-accounts. And what happens is when these things initially get listed, retail goes crazy, the price goes up, folks basically dump on retail. And, you spin that loop as fast as you can, and you can extract an enormous amount of money. Along the way, all these things like DeFi all of a sudden popped out of nowhere. And it's like, hey, you can earn 15, 16, 17, 18%, just deposit the Bitcoin. And so folks would deposit Bitcoin. But then what would happen is like the places where those deposits were held would then need to obviously find places to make that 11, 12, or 13%. And so then they would go off chain to some other random person who was offering to pay them even more than that. And they would try to arb the difference. But it all catches up with you because when something like a Terra goes to zero, all the Bitcoin that was used to basically, run that DeFi process around Terra vanishes, and then all of a sudden you, the lender, are like, hey, can I have my Bitcoin back? And the broker's like, well, actually, I don't have it. I lent it to somebody else. Let me ask that someone else. And they're like, I'm sorry, I don't have it, but I have these Terra coins, because I was running some ARB and now it went to zero. And that's essentially what we're seeing right now. So we have two big problems. And then I think we have a third that's kind of funny. The first big problem is like, obviously in the absence of any regulatory oversight, this stuff is going to happen. Systemic risks are going to build up. That's what we're facing right now, is an enormous amount of systemic risk, largely around Bitcoin. A bunch of this money, I think, has been essentially just vaporized. And so all these people that try to find their deposits, especially in custodial accounts in off-chain brokers, may be SOL at some point. And I think that's just going to be a huge shit show if that actually happens.
And to be clear, Chamath, they don't have the keys to their own Bitcoin. They gave money to a custodial account. They then did this lending, went out to get them to 15%, and they don't have any recourse here. They can't get their Bitcoin.
Well, look at this article.
Why real Bitcoin owners put them in a wallet and own the keys.
Does anybody have recourse to this Three Arrows Capital and all of this other interrelated parties that are now, gone completely bankrupt because of this scam? The answer is absolutely not. So that's the first problem. You have absolutely zero oversight, which means systemic risk has been built up in the system. The second thing is that exactly what you just said, Jason, is that people don't even understand chain of custody here, which is that you thought that you owned this Bitcoin. It turns out you actually may not actually own them at all. You thought that you were properly lending them out. You actually don't. There is no enforceable contract, it turns out. And so I think that's going to be an entire set of different legal issues that are now going to come to the surface because people who actually legitimately lent this stuff out. For example, like if you short a stock and you go and borrow stock from any one of us, there are really tight guardrails. If you wanted to go and put a credit derivative swap on against debt, there's a central clearinghouse that makes sure you're not over levered. You have to go and get audited by a bank to even get the kind of account that allows you to put these derivatives on. None of that was possible in crypto. And then the last thing, which I think is kind of funny, is that we've had to listen to every millennial and Gen Z market observer in crypto tout how this is not like boomers, and they turn out to be the same. I mean, this is the funniest thing of all. It's like, of all of the times you've had to hear how it's so different, it turns out it is entirely the same.